So good evening, everyone. How are you this morning?
Good.
Good? Wonderful, wonderful. My name is Stephanie Robinson. I am the Neighborhood Services Director for the town of Prescott Valley. Thank you so much for coming this evening for this very time-sensitive kind of conversation. We're about to have around housing. So before we get started, I know we want to do a few introductions. So I'm going to invite our town manager, Gilbert Davidson, and after that, Judy, our deputy town manager, will be coming forward to do some introductions and talk a little bit about what we're here this evening. So, Gilbert, sir.
All right, thank you so much, Stephanie, for that and for helping to organize this. And what a great turnout on a Monday night. This is awesome to see so many of our residents that are interested and concerned and passionate about affordable housing needs and issues affecting our community. And so very excited to have all of you here. This would not be possible without a very generous grant from the Arizona Department of Housing. We received a $200,000 grant that enabled us to do this process. And so we certainly want to recognize the State Department of Housing for their support of communities like ours. And it also, this isn't possible without some leadership from our town government with us. We have one of our council members, Councilmember Janelle Kill, who's in the back. I'll have her stand and be recognized. We thank her. But on behalf of all of the town council, every one of them are very passionate and very interested in this topic. And so they said, we're going to lock the doors to this room tonight and you're not leaving until we have a solution to affordable housing. So hopefully you come up with some really good things. I want to mention, joking aside, why this is so important. And, this is an issue that it doesn't just affect Prescott Valley. This affects every community in Arizona across this country. And as we see housing prices continue to rise and basically make it so that many of our community members, people that are working in our schools, our public safety departments, some of our retail stores, having to make very, very tough choices of not being able to live in our community. That's a sad state when we start to see more and more people having to move further and further out. So whatever we can do to try to make sure that we're a full service community that allows all to be a part of our town is definitely one of the key things that we hope to see come out of this. And that's where all of you come in. We need your input. We need your thoughts. If you have had experiences from other places or you've heard of interesting solutions that other communities have come up with, we want to make sure that we're capturing that. And we've got some phenomenal team members and consultant that's been working with us to help to come up with a game plan for our future. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan Judy, our Deputy Town Manager. Thank you.
Well, hello everybody. My name is Ryan Judy. I'm the Deputy Town Manager for Prescott Valley. I'll tell you just a little bit about my housing journey in Prescott Valley. I actually bought my first home in Texas in the year 2000 for a whopping $60,000. And it was a 1,200 square foot starter home. And I sold it 4 years later when I moved to Prescott Valley in 2004 for $70,000. So I thought I was doing okay. I made $10,000 over 4 years. And so then I bought my first home here in 2004 for $160,000. And that was a 1,400 square foot home. And to me, that was sticker shock. I'm like, holy cow, I just sold my house for 70 and now I'm buying a house for 160. So, and as my family grew, I got into some larger housing, and at some point we'll start, downsizing again. But imagine trying to buy a home in Prescott Valley for $160,000. You can't find it anywhere. It doesn't matter, what kind of a housing stock that is. So it's not just a problem in Prescott Valley either. We're seeing this nationally where, housing prices are going like this and wages are going like this. So wages aren't keeping up with the cost of housing. So that's one of the things that we're hoping to address with all of your help. How do we get there? And it's probably not going to be one solution. It's going to be a multitude of things that we'll need to work on, and that's where we need your help. So we're very aware of this issue. We've gotten to a point where anytime we hire a town employee, We want to make sure, have you looked, especially if they're coming from outside of the market, like have you looked at the housing market? Because I can't tell you how many times we've tried to hire an employee and they've said yes, and then they try to look for a home here and they end up backing out because they can't afford the cost of housing. So those are one of the things that we're hoping to address with this study. We did a survey of our town residents just last year, and this was near the top of the priorities for issues that our residents want us to address was housing affordability. So what will we get from this housing plan? We hope to identify gaps and barriers to affordability. We hope to develop some strategies to assess and combat those problems that we have, and provide data-driven recommendations for how we can climb out of this problem that we're having. So we're going to work with Elliott Pollock. You're going to hear from them a little bit later on that are conducting our housing needs assessment. And I'll just end with, before I turn it over, I'll just end with a personal story. Just yesterday, around the dinner table, my 15-year-old son, just out of the blue, said, "Dad, do you think I'll ever be able to afford a house when I'm an adult?" Like, ooh, that's, it kind of really hit home there. That's my own son that's worried about his housing future. I never thought about housing when I was 15 years old, but you see that, it's talked about so much that people are worried about their future. So with that, I'm going to turn the time back over to Stephanie. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Gilbert. Thanks, Ryan. Certainly appreciate some of the comments that you've made, as well as kind of setting us up for the conversation that we're about to have this evening. I wanted to give you a little bit more information. Gilbert happened to mention this wonderful $200,000 grant that we received from the Arizona Department of Housing. Last year, they had a NOFA. And in that NOFA, of course, they were asking 10 communities throughout the state of Arizona to submit a request to do a comprehensive housing plan. And we went on ahead, of course, and applied for that. And better? Okay. We went on ahead and applied for that grant, and we were able to be one of those 10 cities that actually were awarded that $200,000 grant. Fortunately for us, we also decided that we wanted to create some partnerships with other communities here in the Quad City, and realized that the city of Prescott also received a $200,000 grant. And so this needs assessment that we're doing, this process that we're going to be undertaking, we're not doing this solely looking at Prescott Valley. We're also looking at everything else that kind of impacts housing here in our community. And so we are working in partnership with the city of Prescott as well. And one of the things that we were fortunately able to do was to be able to hire Pollock and Associates to be able to really start this process. And so they have actually started to collect all the data so that any decisions that we make as a town will be made based on the data that we have. So I want to actually have Danny Court, and Sheila is actually over here. She's going to be taking a few notes for us, but I'm going to have Danny come up to actually start to present some of that information to you. Throughout the course of the evening, we also are going to be reminding you, if you have not already done so, to complete the housing survey. How many people have done that housing survey already? Yay, I'm glad to see hands raised. Thank you so much. So I'm going to have Danny come on up. He's going to do his presentation, and then we'll have some opportunities to have some more interaction and to also give you an opportunity to ask us a few questions.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to try to speak into this mic, but I do wander. So if I start to fade out, just start pointing me back in this other direction. But my name is Danny Court. I'm an economist and a partner at Elliott D. Pollock and Company. Really quick, we have a project team, a team of consultants. So it's the combination of our combined staff at Elliott D. Pollock and Company, as well as Sheila D. Harris Consulting. Elliott D. Pollock and Company, if you haven't heard of us, we've been around since 1987. We're an Arizona-based firm. I'm an Arizona native. We do about 90% of our work throughout the state. So we are in your communities. I love traveling all around the state, in all of the communities in Arizona, in the Quad City area, Verde Valley, northern and southern Arizona, everywhere. We're doing these assignments. Basically anywhere where economics and real estate meet, that's usually where our work is performed. And then we have Dr. Sheila Harris here in the room with us, also a a historian of housing. She is the founding director of the Arizona Department of Housing. So a true expert in housing in Arizona, especially on affordable housing and what it takes to develop and manage and finance those types of projects. So I wanted to quickly go through kind of what our process is, a little bit on methodology, and then we'll jump into the data. So our process right here, we're in the data collection and analysis period right now. That's the phase that we're in. Later on, as we get through the data and analysis, we're going to talk about barriers and look into barriers to affordable housing. We're doing community outreach. They've mentioned the survey that's online. Please take that survey if you haven't. That's a great way to get your voice heard and get your opinions out there. And then this culminates, as far as our scope, into a housing market demand and gap analysis. Where do we have housing? Where do we not have enough housing? At what levels? At what types? Real quick, an introduction to housing analysis in general. We're looking at influencing factors. We're looking at demographics, economic conditions, government policies. All of these things combined shape our housing environment. What impacts our demographics have? We're talking about population growth, age demographics, what that distribution is, how that impacts supply and demand, our economic conditions, what's our employment rates, what kind of jobs are we producing in the town, what kind of wages are offered, and what's affordable for those wages. And then policy decisions. There's a huge impact to housing in terms of what government actions and policies and decisions are made that in terms of affordability and housing supply. Data is, I live in data. I sit in front of a computer, my head is buried in statistics all day long. I want to find the best, most accurate data available. You probably know in rural Arizona and rural parts of the United States, a lot harder to come by. There are fewer and fewer vendors that are tracking data in your communities. We're looking at government sources, the US Census, varying opinions on that, but it's at least one source of data that we look at. We've also tapped into the Yavapai County Assessor's database. There are also commercial vendors that we're looking at. So we're trying to collect as much data and the most accurate data possible, understanding that there are some limitations to that data, especially in a period like this when the housing market is so dynamic and changing so quickly. Those government surveys and things like that, they'll average it over 5 years, and it doesn't really tell the whole picture of what's going on. And then we also want to make, again, back to relevance, we want to make sure that we've got the most timely, up-to-date data as possible. Our demographic factors that we're really looking at for this part of the housing needs assessment, what's been the impact of population growth, what's our forecast for future population growth, how does that translate into new households, and what kind of households are they, what kind of housing do they need, looking at different age categories, do we have more young families, starter homes, move up, do we need to focus on aging in place, senior facilities and things like that. What employment does in terms of the impact on housing, and then looking at inflation that's occurred over the past several years. Real quick on definitions. Sometimes we get caught up in some of these terminology. You might hear the term affordable housing. You might hear the term attainable housing, workforce housing, missing middle housing. It's all pretty much the same with a little bit of difference. But if you hear that word, basically what the goal is we want every individual, regardless of income, to not be overburdened by their housing costs. And that definition of overburden, it means that they're not spending more than 30% of their income on housing costs. So on a renter's side, that's their rent and utilities. On a homeowner's side, it's a few more categories. Their mortgage, their utilities, their property tax, their homeowner's insurance, all those things combined. If it's affordable, we're really seeking for that 30% or less threshold. Missing middle has become a very popular term. It's basically, there's a term called area median income. So every community has a median income. I like to use really simple math. So let's say the community, their median household income is $100,000. Missing middle means if I make 60% to 120% of that median income. So if I make $60,000 to $120,000, that's been a pain point in trying to find affordable housing for those households, because if you make less than 60% of area median income, there are government programs, there's subsidized housing that you can qualify for. You start making just above that, you no longer qualify. And now we're looking at the private sector or some other public incentive, public investment to try to get those households into an affordable house. I think, and it was mentioned before, it's already an issue in Prescott Valley, trying to find quality employees that can't find affordable housing, or critical service workers, nurses and firefighters and teachers. Those are typically salaries that fall into this missing middle category. So, diving into the data, quick look at your demographics. The average age in Prescott Valley right now, 47.3. Modestly higher than a statewide average, but younger than Yavapai County as a total. Average household sizes, pretty standard here. The average household size, about 2.4 people per household. You actually have slightly larger household sizes in your rental units than you do in ownership units. That's a little bit unique, but it's a pretty tight range there. Education. We've got 90% of individuals that are 25 and older that have at least a high school degree or higher. That's basically on par with county and statewide averages. Those with a bachelor's degree or higher, about 24%. That's lagging a little bit in terms of comparing it to the county and state. The labor force. There is a higher labor force participation in Prescott Valley than when you compare it to Yavapai County. So this is, if you're 16 years and older, do you have a job, or are you looking for a job? That's the labor force. So again, slightly higher than Yavapai County, a little bit lower compared to the state. Labor force growth has been very strong. If you look back to the earlier periods here, that's the impacts of the Great Recession and how long it took for us to kind of dig ourselves out of that economic hole. But you see there, 2020, anemic growth in the labor force. But when you consider what happened in COVID and government shutdown and everyone heading home, you actually fared very well and then kind of jumped out of that. So very good growth in the labor force over the last several years. In terms of the economy, we try to look for economic strengths in a community. This chart here is called a location quotient. So basically, we compare Prescott Valley to the state's economy and their different sectors. If you have a higher concentration in any certain category, it's higher than a 1. That means that you have a basically more of that type of employment, more of those jobs in this industry than if you look at the statewide average. So those industries where you have a higher concentration are bolded here: construction, consumer goods manufacturing, consumer services, healthcare, hospitality and tourism, media publishing and entertainment, metal inputs and transportation related manufacturing, and then retail. Your major employers, the biggest one, top of the list, Yavapai Regional Medical Center, the Unified School District, Cliff Castle Casino and Hotel, the town of Prescott Valley, just in public administration, on down the line. And your unemployment rate, very impressive. The U.S. average right now is about 4%, which is basically full employment. Everyone's very happy with 4%. You're sitting at 2.9%. So most of your folks that are looking for jobs are finding jobs. Very low unemployment rate right now. We also want to look at worker commuting because how many people are coming in from outside the community? Is that an indicator of a housing shortage? So you basically have about 7,400 workers that commute outside of Prescott Valley into the town to work. You have about 15,000 residents that leave the town to go to work elsewhere. Probably not surprising, most people that are working in Prescott Valley, the highest categories coming in from Prescott, and then the other big one coming from Phoenix. And then on the flip side, commuting out to places like Prescott, Chino Valley, and Phoenix to go to work. Looking at housing, this is the current housing inventory as of the U.S. 2023 census, but it is a 5-year average. So we're probably not getting all of the newest residential that's been built. I know there's a lot of apartments coming in. So it is not indicative of that new supply that's come in. But you look across, we start at single-family detached homes. About 70% of the inventory is a single-family detached home, slightly higher than the county average and much higher than the statewide average. When you start getting into the other categories of housing diversity, just under 5% are in one-unit attached. That's like a condo or a townhome. A very high percentage compared to the community, the county and state in duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes. We thought that was an interesting aspect of the community. It does kind of tend toward, this is a category where we can find it in a traditional neighborhood, but it offers more affordable rent or ownership option. And then we highlight apartments here, but we'll go into apartments because we've got a little bit more updated data here. And then obviously you got manufactured and mobile homes, about 13% of your housing stock. That's lower than the county average, a little bit higher than the statewide average there. This is where it's no longer fun to show you the data. This is what your deputy town manager was just discussing. If you bought a home before 2015, congratulations. Housing prices have just marched continually up and up. Just in the last 5 years, single-family home prices are up 55% in Prescott Valley. If you look at the condo townhome market in the town, that's come up 48%. So we're now sitting at just under $490,000 for a single-family home. That's the average price, average sales price, and just over $400,000 for a condo or townhome. So we're well into the 6-figure household income range to be able to afford something in that price range. Home sales have dropped dramatically with the rise in mortgage interest rates. We're now hovering around 7% mortgage interest rates. So gone are the days of a 3% mortgage. And that has created a dampening effect on sales activity. So average year in Prescott Valley selling about 1,500 homes. Now we're just above 800 homes sold in a given year. That's likely to continue until we get some mortgage interest rate relief. And it's also, this is also unique too here is that your housing prices in the greater Phoenix area, the housing price peak was 2022. It's come down, not a lot, but it's come down in the last 2 years. But paired with those higher interest rates, it's actually more expensive to own a home today at the lower price than it was 2 years ago at the higher price at the lower interest rate. You have both problems. Your housing prices kept going up and your interest rates you're affected by. Home price appreciation has moderated. So this is where we're basically 1.5–2% growth versus the last few years when it just went crazy. So it has moderated. It's kind of the same discussion I have with inflation. I say, congratulations, our inflation isn't very high, and everyone's like, no, it's actually still really expensive. So that's kind of where we're at. It's better to have a lower interest, lower home price appreciation than that runaway inflation, but we're still stuck with these high prices. When we split it between new home prices and resales, you see the gap there. There's not a huge gap between a resale home and a new home. So right now, the average new home price just over $505,000 versus a resale at $486,000. New home prices have come down slightly since 2022. That could be a mix issue, potentially maybe offering smaller units, smaller floor plans to try to combat this affordability issue. But we're still right around $500,000 for these homes. Apartments, we're going to start with market rate apartments, and then you also have an inventory of government subsidized, rent restricted LIHTC units. So on the market rate side, really no activity since 2004 until 2019. So we had a 15-year gap in the town of no new apartment supply. And now you're probably, if you're out on the road, thinking, wow, there's a lot of apartments being built. So you've had 5 new communities built since 2019. So we're now up to about 1,400 units of market rate apartment communities. We're sitting right around 20% vacant. So there's 3 communities that are recently opened, still in lease up. So there's about 285 vacant units among those among those properties, and we've had just about 317 apartments be leased during that time. So new apartments getting absorbed. So you can see there that these available units will also be absorbed over the next 12 months. Looking at the unit mix, very few studios, basically none. There's 4 of them, 4 studio units, and then the bulk of the inventory is in 1 and 2 bedroom units. You also have a very healthy supply of 3 bedroom units as well, about 10% there. And we look at the rents. We talked about what it takes to afford to be able to buy a home here. We're basically in the 100,000 and up household income range. Here's the rents for market rate properties in Prescott Valley. It's, studios are about $1,500, 1 bedroom, $1,600. The required income, again, back to this affordable, if I'm only spending 30% of my income, we're talking about $65,000, $70,000 salaries to comfortably afford a studio or 1 bedroom. We're getting into the 2 bedroom, we're need $80,000 salary, and a 3 bedroom above $90,000. So by no means are these these are still very healthy salaries, very, very good household incomes to afford these market rate apartments, but they are filling this need where we've priced out, the $60,000 to $100,000 household income. These market rate apartments are filling that need. It's just on the renter side. Very healthy pipeline coming through. So there's also 781 market rate apartments currently under construction. So those are expected to be delivered in 2025 this year. That will increase the inventory. On the style, there's some traditional, and there's also, again, back to terminology, there's if you hear build for rent or single family for rent, detached. Those are 2 new communities that are coming online. Both of those built by the same firm, Bungalows. That's their product, Bungalows at Market Street and Village Way. So these are they might look like duplexes. They might look like standalone, typically single story. Some of them are 2-story, but look much more like a single family detached neighborhood, just in a more dense, like 12 to 15 units an acre. But not your 2 or 3 story traditional apartment community. So again, new housing diversity coming through into the town. And then there is also a pipeline of projects that have been approved with an asterisk on Lakeshore. We know that is subject to referendum. So that remains to be seen what happens with that project. There's also a few proposals out there. So basically another 2,300 units also kind of in the planning or entitlement process. On the subsidized rent LAHTC communities, these are usually smaller communities, so they usually range anywhere from like 20 to 80 units, as opposed to like a market rate apartment is usually like 150 units or more. So usually smaller. We've got kind of an older stock of that housing here, but a total of 550 units. The last one built was Viewpoint 2, which was 72 units. And then a couple of bond projects as well. They're just different programs, but the bottom line is these are typically rent restricted. Some of them are senior properties, so only seniors can rent in them, and they're low income. So targeting families and seniors at the lower income levels. So we do have that existing inventory. And then, like I mentioned, the duplexes, the threeplexes, we're really trying to dig into that. There's not a great source of data. No one's really tracking these except for when they list them for rent on the MLS. So we pulled some of that data. Sample rents here, about $1,600 is the median. So that was about the same as a one-bedroom apartment in the market rate apartment side. Minimum $1,100 and maximum about $2,100. So these are kind of mimicking market rate apartment rents right now. And then affordability. So this is where we cross-check the incomes in the community with what it costs to afford the housing in the community. So this is your range of incomes, household incomes, segregated by income range. You can kind of look across here and compare yourself to the county and state, but really want to call your attention again to those households at the higher end of the income range. So 100,000 or more, we're basically talking about 30% or less of households in Prescott Valley making $100,000 or more. That means that 70% of households make less than $100,000 and are therefore priced out of the ownership market today. Your median income is $70,800. Homeowners making slightly more at $76,700 and renters making $60,000. If we reverse engineer, we start with your income and then figure out what house price you can afford when you take into account down payment and mortgage insurance and property tax and all of that. If we start at your median household income of $70,800, those folks at the median income range can afford a $246,000 house, non-existent in Prescott Valley. Even on the FHA side with a smaller down payment, that also comes with more FHA insurance premiums and things like that. We're basically at the same point. A $230,000 home is affordable for households making median income, making $70,000 a year. We just don't have that housing stock anymore here in Prescott Valley. When we look at essential workers, again, looking at their median wages, the underlying assumption here too, I like to caveat, this is for a single income earner. So I do know that, we know that there are dual income households out there. So you can kind of double this up if you know that you have, if we have these dual incomes, but single income earners at these essential worker type occupations, and then the monthly affordable housing cost or rent that they can afford. You saw in my previous slide, our rents were basically starting at $1,500 on the market rate side. So that excludes everybody but police and sheriff's patrol officers and registered nurses for rents for apartments. And then when you look at what they can afford for a mortgage, again, we are well outside of being able to afford the home prices today. And this is, again, I've heard this mentioned a few times. This is a national issue. This is something that every community in Arizona and across the country is dealing with. We recently did a really interesting poll in Maricopa County where we asked homeowners, could you afford the house that you live in today? And 40% said no. So at my income, I cannot buy my house. That's what 40% of homeowners in Maricopa County said. That's really what we're dealing with today, is we've got this have and have not of a lot of people that have gotten into home ownership before all this run up, built up all this equity and are comfortably affording their homes, but anyone moving in and transitioning and trying to find a home today is priced out. Renter housing burden. So this is back to this equation that we're trying to get everyone at 30% or less of their income paying toward rent. Right now in Prescott Valley, 41.5% of renters pay more than 30% of their income toward rent, and 19% of them pay more than 50% of their income toward rent. So one of their 2 paychecks a month goes straight to rent, and then the rest of it is for the rest of their household budget. Again, noticing that this is you are not uniquely cost burdened here. You look at the county, basically in the same position, 41% and 20%, and then at the state, even worse. So 47% of renters across the state are rent overburdened, and 22% are severely overburdened, paying 50% or more of their household income toward rent. On the ownership side, 32% of homeowners are also overburdened by their housing costs, comparing their housing costs to their income. That is slightly better than the county average of 35%, slightly worse than the statewide average of 26.5%. So some work to do there. Looking forward, will we have housing demand going forward in Prescott Valley? I think you all know the answer is yes. Official state forecast estimates of population are that we're expecting 4,600 new residents over the next 5 years in Prescott Valley, 11,050 new residents over the next 15 years. And I think you've been outpacing your forecast to date. So you could consider that a conservative forecast as long as we have the housing to accommodate the new population. So when we translate that into housing demand, basically we're saying about 400 new units needed per year from now till 2030. That starts to taper off, about 300 to 250 new homes as we get into the next decade. When you look at what you've been permitting, what you've actually been building, you've been building way more than that historically over the last 5 to 10 years. So we had 548 new home permits in 2024, about 500 in 2023. Big jump in 22 of over 1,000 units permitted. So building a lot of housing, and the population is coming. But missing middle housing on the development side is everything between a traditional single-family detached home at the least dense side, and then the mid-rise apartments, which is really not a product type that's appropriate for Prescott Valley, but we're talking 4, 5, 6-story type. But everything in between that are options to consider in the zoning code, options to consider of whether or not you want that kind of product. Does it fit with our community character? And so we're talking about kind of duplexes, things that can be accommodated in a single family lot, but a little bit more dense. There are courtyard homes that share some common area space, but smaller units. But again, we're not talking about apartment communities, but just increasing density that a private developer could come in, provide smaller units, and therefore a little bit more affordable for our population, and then it kind of goes up the density range. So these are things to consider as a community, of understanding the need, understanding that there are only limited government dollars to invest to try to get rent subsidies, and then that the private market solution really is density. And it doesn't have to mean 30 units to the acre, but it does mean more dense than 2 to 3 units per acre, and what fits into our community character, what can be done, what can we support. Our next steps for our scope of work is to continue to identify barriers to affordable housing, addressing the gap. So we are going to be stratifying the community by income and by what is available in terms of types of housing, and show you where that gap is along the income spectrum. And then working with the town, we want to be able to start to develop educational material to be able to get this information out to the town, let everyone dissect it and absorb it. We are still promoting the online survey, so we are hosting that, but there's a link on the Town of Prescott's website. I think it's on Facebook and social media, so you'll continue to see those materials. But that is the URL there, and then when you get to that link, these are the type of questions. It should take you about 10 minutes to complete, but really want to hear from everybody. And thank you so much for showing up tonight. I love to see this type of community participation. It's really wonderful to see.
Thank you so much. All right, everyone. So I wanted to first, before I get into some of the next steps, I wanted to answer some of the questions that I heard kind of being voiced around the room. One question, for instance, was, what do I do, or how do I get involved to let individuals know what my opinion is regarding some of the developments and things that are coming about. And what I would say, there's a litany of ways to do that. Certainly, yes, you can certainly attend a council meeting, but we also have an opportunity for you to attend P&Z meetings. I know Donna's here from our Development Services Department, but if you have those type of questions, if you really want to know what's going on, the town does its best to be as transparent as possible regarding all of these different processes. So you can certainly get in touch with our Development Services Department. You can also call Neighborhood Services, but all of that information is for public knowledge. It is normally listed by either our Development Services Department or our town clerk. And so anyone and everyone is welcome to that information. And so we certainly invite you to give us your opinion. Let us know what's going on so that we can include that into the assessment process of any development that's coming about. So that was one question I know that was kind of raised. The other part of, I guess what I want to do is to also kind of put the pieces together. Part of what I also heard was, where does this fit? How does this initial kind of data assessment fit into a bigger picture? So let me take a moment just to kind of explain that, I guess, a little bit more in detail. As I mentioned before, we had the wonderful opportunity to get this $200,000 grant from the Arizona Department of Housing. And what that grant does is allows us to have the conversation about what does a comprehensive housing plan look like for the town of Prescott Valley? What is unique to our particular community? And how do we go about defining what that looks like? And so one of the first things that we did in the grant application that we put in was to say, let's get the data. Rather than us make the assumption about what the town wants, what it doesn't want, whether it wants density or whether it doesn't want density, let's at least first start with the actual data about what this town looks like, what our employment stats look like, what our housing currently looks like, and then we can start to have the conversation about what resources are needed, what type of plan do we need to have. And none of this, absolutely none of this, will be put pen to paper and be approved until it goes to one, our town manager, and more importantly, our elected officials. Those are the individuals that will work with you, listen to everything that you have said, listen to and look at the survey results. We want to make sure we give you every opportunity to kind of chime in about what your feelings are regarding housing here in the town of Prescott Valley. So once we have all that information formatted, then we'll go through the process, or formulated, then we'll go through the process of actually pulling that together and creating a housing strategy. And that housing strategy will be given to the entire town. We'll have multiple opportunities for residents to kind of chime in as to what that policy looks like, what resources we'll even put to that. And in terms of those resources, that kind of piggybacks on the other piece that we also have going on right now, which is our Community Development Block Grant Program. For the first time, the town of Prescott Valley is now considered an entitlement community, which means unless something changes right now in Congress, as well as whatever's going on at federal level, we would end up getting somewhere close to $300,000 every year to put towards needs within the community. So one of the things that you'll see in that survey is not only what's going on housing-wise, but what additional amenities do we need? What additional infrastructure does the town need? Do we need roads? Do we need sidewalks? I know we have had the tragedy of having a young man lose his life, for instance, and we want to make sure, of course, that in terms of our pedestrian walkways and things like that, that we make it a lot easier for people to be able to commute around the town, whether that is using a vehicle or whether that's a bicycle or even whether or not you're walking. And some of the things that we'll be able to do with that Community Development Block Grant is look at our infrastructure. We'll also be able to look at whether or not we want to put additional resources to maintaining our current housing stock. And so what that could look like, for instance, is if you're over the age of 60 and you're struggling to try to figure out how to maintain your home and keep up with the maintenance, we could have housing rehab programs. So there are a litany of different things that we can possibly do with that Community Development Block Grant money. But what we first want to hear is what you would like to see us do with those funds. Is it an extraordinary amount of money? Unfortunately not. But over the course of time, that $300,000, give or take, will actually make a major, I think, impact on the town of Prescott Valley. But one of the first steps in that process is to listen to the community and for us to hear from you and for you to share with us what you feel, what you like, what you dislike, and whether you're for or against. I want to hear all of it. And that's what the survey is for. If on that survey there are some pieces or some additional information that you have not had the opportunity to share just in that normal, I guess, multiple choice kind of process that the survey has, at the very bottom of it, if you can hang on for those 10 minutes or so that it takes you to do it, it gives you the opportunity to write in any additional comments that you may have. And so I invite you to certainly do that. If at any time, for instance, if you don't want to necessarily write all those things out or do the survey electronically, my business card is sitting out front. Please send me an email. Let me know what that information is. I will be sure to share it with Danny and Sheila and the consultants that we're working with, but we certainly want to hear from you. So whether that's a phone call, whether it is an email, please let us know what that is so that we can share that information. We certainly hear what you're saying regarding the commitment to making sure we have enough water resources. I can tell you that the town also has a strategic plan, and within that strategic plan, one of the pillars of that is looking at water and land conservation. But we're also looking at quality of life. We're also looking at prosperous community. So there are 4 different tenets that we're looking at. All town employees are looking at that because we want to make sure that we're listening to what you're telling us to do. And so we invite you again to participate in that process. On your table, hopefully everyone had an opportunity to pick up the agenda, and the agenda will give you the QR code. If you've already taken a survey, I invite you to hand that to your neighbor or someone else so that they can then also take that survey as well, because we really do want that information. We are certainly pleased with having over 300 people already respond. But in a town of over 50,000 people, I'd like to see that number closer to 50,000. That way I know that I've truly heard everything that everyone has to say. That's why we're asking individuals to not only share it within your household, within your faith-based organizations or communities, at work, family, friends, anyone that lives here in Prescott Valley, because we do want to hear what everyone has to say. Yes, we have sent it out, of course, to some of our senior communities. We're putting the cards that you see out front at our senior centers. We have certainly shared it with the school districts as well so that they can, of course, share that information, whether it's through PTAs or similar type organizations. We are not turning or leaving any, rock unturned. We're going to try our best to get it out as much as we possibly can. That's why you see so much of it out on social media. But really the crux of everything belongs to the people that are in this room. You obviously coming tonight, you are demonstrating how much this is of a concern to you. Whether you are for housing, whether you want density, whether you don't want density, it is a concern. And so we want to hear all of those concerns. We also want you to share it with whoever you deem appropriate to share it with, because we don't want to just hear from one side of the table. We want to make sure that the information that we are gathering is as well-rounded as it can possibly be, to include some of our younger adults that are struggling. We want to make sure that whether you are the beggar that is working at Fry's or the individual that is drawing blood for one of our seniors, everyone that is currently living here deserves a place to stay and safe, decent, affordable housing. That has nothing to do with who may be coming in, but everything to do with the people that are even currently living here. And so that's why the survey is so important. So we're hoping that we can get that information out. We're hoping that you will certainly share it with friends and family, co-workers, so that we can make sure that when we have an opportunity to pull all this information together, that we can present some information to you that hopefully at least starts to address some of the concerns that were voiced here today.